Welcome back to Beer Brackets, everybody. This is a fun one. We touch on a couple of non-alcoholic beers before on the channel, and specifically recently we did the Run Wild IPA by Athletic Brewing, and the entire time during that episode, you were mentioning, man, and we talked about how the Hazy was probably even better. We were really enjoying the Run Wild IPA, and there was just kind of like the Hazy looming in the distance. And you were saying how you tried it, you loved it so much. At the time, I hadn't tried it. I've tried it since, and I definitely agree with you. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it does in a Beer Brackets non-alcoholic beer review. So far, the highest scoring non-alcoholic beer that we've had is Guinness Zero. The Run Wild IPA score just under that. So is this going to be possibly the first perfect non-alcoholic beer we've ever had?
It could be, my friend, but this poses the question: like, do we have a non-alcoholic perfect beer roundtable? Like, and what? How is that?
Is
that
would.
like?
It would be a lonely roundtable. It would just be one beer, just sitting at the table by itself.
It would be. Yeah. There has to be one though to start the roundtable.
There has to be one to start. Yeah. I think for me personally, for a non-alcoholic beer at this stage, to get a perfect score, it would really need to be. Really need to knock it out of the park. Because if you're giving out perfect scores right away, because you're thinking the NA beer world probably still has a lot of room to improve, right? So are we going to be so bold as to give out a perfect score right now, implying that it might not get better than this? We'll see. We'll see how we feel. We always go by how we feel in the moment. That's how we run in the pub.
I think it's always a combination, right? Like Guinness ended up being one of the first one we reviewed, but also at the same time, if I think about my personal history, it's probably one of the first beers that made me fall in love with beer. So sometimes, it can be tricky. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
If you're curious about learning about the Athletic Brewery a little bit, we touched on the Run Wild IPA review, so we don't have to worry about that in this one. This one, we can just jump right into it. Let's get into it, man. Let's see how the Free Wave Hazy IPA does in a Beer Brackets non-alcoholic beer review. Let's find out.
The good thing is the beer noises are still there.
That's right. That's one part of the NA beer experience that doesn't go anywhere. The beer noises are still there. One thing that I've noticed with the athletic beers, and maybe a little bit with NA beers in general, is that the hops are a lot more present on the aroma.
Yep, I agree.
Than a lot of actual alcoholic beers. I don't know if you've had the same experience like this one. You take a whiff, and it's just like pure fresh hops.
It is. I would almost go as far and say that you get like the hop presence is, to your point, not only more present, but also more clean. It's almost you can easily identify those hops and the different character of it.
Which, super piney.
Yeah. There's grapefruit, there's pine, there's resin. It's very, very polished, very clean, and very present.
I wonder, if that's just part of masking those slightly unpleasant, like we described, these vegetal flavors that come with any beers. How, maybe just pumping it up with a little bit more hops than you would normally put into a recipe is a way of masking those off flavors a little bit. I wonder. Either way, man, so what do you think? I know we just sort of described the aroma a little bit.
We did. But, we got to give it a score. That's right. I agree on the analysis. The hops are the main thing, and that's probably what draws me into this glass. But I will say, I normally enjoy it out of the can. I've had it a couple of times out of the glass. I've never analyzed it this much. And I love grapefruit aroma. It's just something that always gets me. And I find it very fresh. It's just smells like having, cut open a grapefruit. Especially thinking non-alcoholic beers, especially thinking a lot of the other offerings. I'm going to start high here, my friend. I'm going to start with a 3. But that might not come as a surprise because... this is honestly, I to this day, this and Guinness are my go-to. And we were talking about right before the review, those are two that I like to buy and that I also look forward to drink regardless of the fact that they are NAs. So
what I love about Athletic is that all their beers taste really fresh. I think when we reviewed the Run Wild IPA, I compared it a little bit to a Sierra Nevada beer in the sense that it smelled like fresh malt and fresh hops.
Yeah.
The same thing with this, like we just said, it smells like you're sticking your nose up to, you're picking freshly grown hops off the vine, you're rubbing it between your hands and sticking your nose between your hands and smelling them. That's what it smells like. And you really clearly get the grapefruit, that citrus. this is such a subjective thing. For me personally, with my IPAs, what's appealing to me is to have a little bit more malt in there as well, along with the hops to have that balance. This is like all hops, but it's great. It's so well done. It's very inviting for somebody who's not like a hop head, as I've heard it called before when we did the tour of Tampa Bay Brewing Company, and Anthony used that term hop head. I loved it. As somebody who's not a hop head, I appreciate this so much. So because it's not my thing, and I think it's a little unbalanced in that sense, but it's super good quality, I'll go with the 2.5. I think it deserves
That's
that.
fair, my friend.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fair.
All right, buddy.
Well,
let's take a sip.
Let's take a sip. Cheers. Yeah.
It's such a brave new world grading NA beers, right? We've just been doing alcoholic beers for so long, and when you're trying to approach a beverage like this, it's almost like it's a completely different beverage in some ways. And
it is.
How do you classify those characteristics in terms of like quality? It's tough. It's we're exploring this just like everybody else. This whole NA wave is coming in the past couple of years. It's getting more and more popular, and just like everybody else who's watching, we're learning too, and we're exploring this at the same time.
It's very, very, very interesting. To your point, my friend, I think that one of the main components that it's hard probably to approach is the fact that, especially on the taste and the mouthfeel, it's very different compared to regular beers. That's where I think it comes across the most that you're not drinking a regular beer. Trying to keep that in mind, I find that the taste very well balanced, considering a lot of times, like we've mentioned, there's in NA beers, you have like this vegetal note. We refer to it as, you came up with this term, my friend, and I love it, like the beer tomato. And it's true. It's like there's this umami character mixed into a vegetal note that it's I can't quite pinpoint. We can't quite pinpoint correctly.
It's like acidic like a tomato.
Yes.
But still vegetal like a green vegetable.
It's a strange combination. Yeah. It's almost like in Italian we say minestrone, right? Like the minestrone is
like some. Oh my god, yeah, like some onion too. Like it's very just vegetal.
Yeah,
like a minestrone soup, dude.
Yeah,
you did it. You did it. No, seriously. Because since I think the first time we brought this up in the Heineken Zero review, and I coined the beer tomato, I was trying to think like there's another descriptor that I just can't think of. Like something. It's minestrone soup.
See, by talking and brainstorming, we found out this beer mystery. We figured it out.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's something that is present in a lot of NA beers, and especially, let's say, like the old school beers, NA beers, had that way more. But now, like when you drink something like this, it's almost not present. And in this one here in particular, I don't even think I can find it because of the hop presence and for how heavily it leans towards the hops and the bitterness.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with the 2.5, my friend. If it had a little bit more body in a sense on the taste, a little bit more present, more malt presence, it would be bringing it up to that 3. What do you think?
This is very hard. This is very hard for me to describe because I think the common note for me through this whole thing is just going to be the hop presence is really strong. It's almost like 4K hops. It's just HD hops. It's very, very, very particular and strong and potent. And again, I think that's done for a reason to mask any other kind of off flavors in an NA beer. Man, I'm still looking for a little bit more malt in my beer, even though this is delicious for an NA beer. And this is nitpicking because for an NA beer, this is among the best. This is definitely among the best that I've ever had. There's no doubt. I'm just envisioning for myself what would be my perfect, well-balanced NA beer. I'm going to stick with the 2.5 as well. I think that's very fair. It's good. I mean, if you're looking for something that tastes like a beer, that gives you all as many characteristics of beer as possible without having the alcohol, this product here, Athletic, they're hazy, they're run wild, as close as you could possibly get that I've tried at least. Is it exactly like a hazy IPA? No, but it's a damn good NA beer, especially for 70 calories. This is really, really good. I'm impressed by what they do. There's no doubt about it. Mouthfeel refresher.
All right, there it is. Let's
do it. Beer bracket tradition.
And here
this
we go.
beer, it's interesting. Like hazy, it is hazy.
It is hazy, right?
Like it's almost like
they delivered.
pastel-y in color. It's very and it doesn't have as much carbonation, obviously, as a regular alcoholic beer does, of course, just from the lack of fermentation, right? It's never going to be exploding with a big thick head.
To your point, the carbonation is not extremely sharp. Probably in the context of this, I don't mind it too much for the fact that there's enough flavor there to carry some of those elements.
Totally.
I would like it
don't
more.
Have sharp carbonation usually to begin with, anyways.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
With this particular style, it works.
So exactly, to your point, it works here. I would agree a little bit more would be appreciated, but I think that for me, the biggest, if you want to call it like difference compared to regular beers, and I hate to always make this comparison because we're drinking a different type of beverage, but that lightness of the body of the beer that really shows here when on the mouthfeel. You have this absolute crisp, clean taste that mixed with bitterness coming obviously from the hop presence that leaves a very refreshing feel as a mouthfeel. The carbonation disappears. There's no oiliness. There's no stickiness. It makes you want to go back into the glass already, which is one of the things that makes me always crave this beer. Like whenever I see it, because it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that tastes like, and it's refreshing. It's thirst quenching. For that reason alone, I'm going to give it 3 points because I think it's very well done.
I will match you on that score. I think as a mouthfeel for an NA beer, especially considering the style being a hazy IPA, I think this comes extremely, extremely close to hitting all the notes of a hazy IPA. It's got some body to it. Obviously, it's not going to have the same kind of thick, creamy body that a fully alcoholic hazy IPA would have, but it's very close. It's close enough that it can fool you. It can fool your beer brain. Now the finish, what do you think?
Before I jump into the finish, my friend, allow me to say, like, very well said about that fools you into. That's a beautiful statement. I love that. I think this describes this beer perfectly. Finish is always interesting, and I think with NA beers, my experience is that usually is where you tend to get some notes that might be off-putting. I don't get too much of that minestrone note or beer tomato, as we've called it before. Interesting enough, I that's where I get most of the malt presence, but malt in terms of the finish that you would get on a regular beer. So it's obviously heavily hopped, but you do get a little bit of that malty sweetness. And on the finish usually is where I'm kind of deciding, okay, well, is this going to fatigue my palate? And I've had this many, many times. I find like I can easily drink one and it feels like a session beer. Again, for that reason, I'm going to give it a 3, my friend. I'm really enjoying that.
I agree with what you said in the sense that finishes of NA beers are where they normally tend to fall off. And you sort of get those off-putting flavors where it's like, at first it's like, oh, that's nice. And then it's like, And then after half of it starts to wear on you, and half of it, you finish one, you're like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm going to have this again. That's all right, but didn't really do it for me, right? It's normally the finish that gets to you. And as far as any beer finishes go, this is amazing. For me personally, I'm still going to reserve a 3 for something that really just wows me, really to the point where I'm like, wow, that is like as close as I could possibly imagine to a real beer. I'm going to go with a 2.5. Like you said, it hides that sort of vegetal notes so well. So as an overall beer experience, buddy, now from beginning to end, for the Freeways Athletic Brewing Hazy IPA, what do you think?
This is probably one of the first NA beers that have given me hope in the future of NA beers. And I think everybody who's our age kind of like knows the let's say the landscape of NA beers that we grew up with, and
Beck's.
And that was not something that was an option. Like it would be something you say like, okay, I'll have one, but then you try it and you say, no, that was a mistake. And then, maybe
they were terrible.
3 or 4 years later, you try it again and you say, nope, that was a mistake.
Yeah, that was a mistake. Exactly.
This one here was the first one really that I remember when I tried. I was like, okay, this is special. This is something different.
This is close.
So for that reason, my friend, I'm going to give it a 3 on the overall experience because I think it deserves it. I personally really enjoy the hop character of this specific beer. The grapefruit, like I said, I'm a huge fan of that, and the freshness of it mixed with a little bit of pine. So maybe that's what's making me rate it so high. I mean, it's basically short of 0.5 of being a perfect beer for me.
It's such a journey, this NA beer tasting, because I remember the first time I tried an Athletic beer. Actually, the first NA beer that I tried that really blew me away, that I thought this was different, was a beer that we're going to be reviewing soon by Partake Brewing. And I tried their pale ale, and that was the first one where I was like, oh my God, this is actually something that I could drink. It's important to keep in mind how far NA beers have come. And the reason that I'm so like hesitant to give out like perfect scores on these is because I think there's still so far for them to go. And they're miles ahead of where they started with. I still believe and I still have hope that they're incredible now, and I think they can still get a little bit better and still a little bit closer. So as an overall beer experience, this is fantastic. I mean, if you're looking for something that's going to be close to a beer experience that doesn't have those nasty characteristics, like go back and watch our Heineken Zero review if you want to have an idea of, or hear our description of what we find are unpleasant characteristics on non-alcoholic beer. I think on that one, we get into that pretty well. So if you compare this to that, this is a masterpiece. As it stands right now, as the current, landscape for NA beer stands, beginning to end, yeah, I would say it's up to around 3 beer experience, definitely. It hits the mark and it achieves something that hasn't been achieved, at least something I haven't tried. So final scores on this one for Alessandro came out to a 4.83 on 5, which is an outstanding beer in our beer rating system. And for myself, a little bit lower, 4.5 on 5, but still an outstanding beer. So we placed it in the same category there. This was amazing. This was so much fun. I'm so happy that we got to finally review this one together, and also to give our viewers a good idea of, if you're shopping for NA beers, if you're looking for a good alternative to have, during the week or something, just to switch things up with every once in a while. Hopefully this gave you an idea of one to try. And whatever you do, click that beer bell down below, because YouTube will let you know when we're in the pub having a beer.
And no matter what, don't forget to close your beer brackets or NA beer brackets.
Cheers, everybody.